Hey, today on Animal Quests, 7 people who ignored the one rule that keeps you alive on safari and never came home. From a man in Zimbabwe who climbed out of the vehicle for a better photo of a bull elephant, to a young woman on a canoe in the Okavango who pushed in close to a hippo the guide had told her to leave well alone. But first, a woman in the Maasai Mara who was warned, in plain words, to stay inside the vehicle and reached for the door handle anyway. The afternoon of August 4th, 2018 was warm and golden over the Maasai Mara in Kenya, the most famous safari country on earth. A single open vehicle sat parked a short way off, from a pride of lions in the long grass, engine idling, a guide at the wheel, and a handful of guests leaning out with their cameras. The lions lay flat and heavy in the heat, a big pride, several lionesses, and a scatter of young ones, paying the vehicle no attention at all. Deborah Lang was in the back, closest to the edge of the vehicle, and she had decided she wanted a photograph without anything at all between her lens and the cats. Deborah was 52, an American on the trip she had been dreaming about for years, and she had been a careful, easy guest all week, right up until this one afternoon. The guide had said it at the start of every single drive, the way every guide in that country says it, that the animals see the vehicle as one large harmless shape and never once count the separate people sitting inside it. And he had told them the single rule a whole safari rests on: you do not stand up above the line of the vehicle, you do not lean out of it, you do not, for any reason, get out. The pride was close that afternoon, closer than all week. The light was perfect, and the lions looked like enormous, contented house cats dozing in the sun. That is the whole trap of it. A pride at 40 or 50 feet, full and sleepy and ignoring you completely, does not look like anything to fear. And a week of exactly that had quietly taught Deborah the warnings were overblown. She wanted the shot clean, with no window and no vehicle frame in it. She asked the guide to let her lean right out, and he told her no, plainly, that the edge of the vehicle was the line and she was to stay well inside it. She waited until his attention was on the far side of the pride, put her hand on the vehicle, and stepped 1 foot down onto the ground. The guide told her no, at the start of every drive, and again in that moment. She stepped out of the vehicle anyway. The instant a person breaks the clean outline of the vehicle, the quiet arrangement falls apart. The lions no longer see one big harmless shape sitting on the track. They see a small, upright, separate thing that has suddenly appeared at close range in the middle of their afternoon. And a lion reads a thing like that as either a threat or a chance, and either way, the answer comes at once. A lion can cover 40 feet of open ground in the time it takes a startled person to get 1 foot back up into a vehicle. There is no warning growl and no slow build to it. There is only the decision made somewhere behind those eyes, and then the lion is simply there. The nearest lioness was up and moving before Deborah's foot had even properly settled onto the ground. She came low and flat and fast across the open grass, no run-up and no sound, and 2 more of the pride peeled off the ground behind her the moment the first one committed. Deborah had time to half turn back toward the vehicle and no time at all to do anything with it. The first lioness hit her at full speed and took her down against the side of the vehicle, and the others were on her in the same breath. Inside, the guide and the guests could do nothing but watch it happen a few feet away, unable to reach her without climbing out into the same grass. The pride dragged her out and away from the vehicle into the long grass, and then a pride of lions did with what it had brought down what a pride of lions does. The killing part was over in seconds. The rest went on, out in the grass, and there was nothing a single soul in that vehicle could do but sit and know it was happening. A lion dozing by your vehicle is still a fully wild lion. It just hasn't been given a reason yet to notice you're there. The guide got the vehicle moving and the shocked guests away and radioed back to camp what had happened. Help would come, but everyone who heard the call understood it would come to recover her, not to save her. The pride had what it had taken and was not going to give it back. Wildlife authorities recorded it the way they record the handful that happen this way every year, almost always the same story: a person who left the vehicle. The lions were not touched for it, because they had done nothing that a lion does not do to a small animal that steps out of a car and into the middle of the pride. Deborah's family was reached through the embassy, and the guide, who had said no and been ignored by a guest sure she knew better, was left to carry that afternoon for the rest of his life. The next man made almost exactly the same mistake, except he made it on his own 2 feet, out in the open, in front of an animal even bigger than a lion. The morning of June 19, 2014 was bright and dry in Hwange, the great national park in western Zimbabwe, elephant country as much as anywhere in all of Africa. A self-drive vehicle had pulled over on the sand road where a lone bull elephant fed among the trees a short way off, huge and unhurried, tearing branches down with his trunk. Lars Vandenberg was behind the wheel, a Dutch visitor doing the park the independent way, with no guide, his wife beside him, and another couple in the back. He had been hoping the whole trip for a photograph exactly like this one. A big lone bull out in the open with nothing in the frame but the animal itself. Lars was 45, confident, handy with a camera, and completely out of his depth with what he was looking at, though he did not know it. Every rule of a self-drive park comes down to one idea: that you stay in the vehicle and keep your distance, and that a lone bull elephant is very likely the most dangerous thing you will meet all day. The bull in front of them looked calm and slow and entirely peaceful. Lars looked at him and decided the car was in the way of the shot he wanted. He edged the vehicle closer and closer again, until the bull lifted his head from the trees and turned square on, ears spread wide, and stopped feeding. That was the moment to back away slowly and leave the animal alone. Instead, Lars decided he wanted to be in the photograph himself. He put the vehicle in park with the engine still running, told the others he would only be a second, opened his door, and stepped out onto the sand to have his wife take a picture of him standing in front of the bull. A person stepping down out of a vehicle into the open is exactly what a bull elephant reads as a challenge. A small, upright shape that has broken away from the big, harmless one and is now standing alone on his ground. He had a wild bull elephant filling his windscreen, and his first instinct was to climb out and stand in front of it for a photo. A bull elephant gives one warning, and most people cannot read it in time: a spread of the ears, a lift of the head, and a hard, unblinking stare. After that warning comes the charge, and a bull can go from standing still to a full run in a stride or two, and is far faster over open ground than any person alive. 10 tons of animal at a dead run does not stop and does not swerve and cannot be outpaced. At close range, on foot, with a vehicle door a few steps away, there is simply nowhere for a person to get to in the time they have. The bull came almost the instant Lars was clear of the door. There was no long bluff charge and no second warning. It dropped its head and drove straight at him across the short stretch of open sand, and Lars turned for the vehicle and managed perhaps a single step. The bull caught him well before he reached the door. It put its head and its tusks down and drove him into the ground. And then it did what an enraged bull does to a thing beneath it, using its trunk and its feet and the whole of its enormous weight over and over in a way a human body is simply not built to survive even once. His wife and the other couple were a few feet away behind thin metal and glass, screaming and helpless, with nothing to do but watch. When the bull was finished, it stood over the place for a long, terrible moment, ears still spread, and then it turned and walked back off into the trees to feed again, as if nothing at all had happened. People see an elephant and think gentle and slow. Up close and out of the car, it is 10 tons that's decided that you are a problem. Lars's wife climbed across into the driver's seat, got the vehicle moving, and drove until she found another car and then, eventually, a ranger, but there had been nothing to be done from the moment the bull committed to the charge. Rangers recovered what there was to recover. The bull was not hunted, because a bull defending his ground from a person who walked up to him on foot has done nothing unusual. The park noted one more self-drive death of the kind that falls most often on people who mistake a calm animal for a safe one. The family was taken home through their embassy. The next one was not on land at all. She was down low on the water in a hollowed-out canoe, drifting toward the one animal on the whole delta the guide had told her more than once to keep well away from. The afternoon of September 23rd, 2021 was still and hot on the Okavango Delta. In Botswana, where the safari is done from a mokoro, a shallow dugout canoe pulled quietly through the reeds by a guide standing in the stern. A pair of the little canoes moved slowly along a channel of clear water, the guests sitting right down at the waterline, close enough to trail a hand in the water beside them. Chloe Adkins was in the front canoe, a young British traveler on the trip of her life, camera up, when a pod of hippos surfaced out in the deeper water ahead of them, ears flicking, eyes and broad backs breaking the surface. Chloe was 28 and thrilled by the whole delta, and she wanted the hippos far closer than the guide pulling her canoe would take her. He had already begun angling the mokoro away toward the reeds and the shallows, exactly the way they are trained to, keeping the distance open and keeping the canoe out of the deep water where a hippo can come up underneath it from below. A mokoro rides an inch above the surface and offers a hippo no resistance at all, which is the entire reason the safety of it depends on staying well back and never crowding the animals. Chloe asked him to take her in closer for the photograph. He told her no, and kept steadily poling for the shallow water. What happened next is not fully clear, because the two people who could say for certain were in the water within a minute. What is clear is that the front canoe ended up far nearer the pod than the guide had wanted, whether Chloe leaned and shifted her weight to close the gap, or the channel pinched them in, or both. A mokoro is a delicate, tippy thing. It answers to every small movement, and a guest leaning right out over the side to reach a photograph can swing the whole canoe toward exactly the deep water the guide is working so hard to stay out of. The front of the canoe drifted out over the edge of the deep channel where the pod had gone down, and a bull hippo came up beneath it. The whole safety of a mokoro is distance. She wanted a closer photo, and closer is the one thing that safety cannot survive. A hippo kills more people in Africa than any of the big cats, and on the water it is at its most dangerous. It can move along the bottom unseen, come up under a boat with enough force to throw it into the air, and it bites with a jaw that can crush a mokoro and everyone in it. It does not need to be provoked in any way a person would even recognize as provocation. A thin canoe drifting over its head in its channel is provocation more than enough. The bull came up under the front of the canoe and flipped it clean over, and Chloe and her guide were in the water in an instant, in the deep channel, in among the surfacing pod. The second Mokoro was too far back to do anything at all but watch it happen. In the water, a hippo is faster than any swimmer alive, and it does not miss, and the bull turned at once on the nearest thing, thrashing at the surface. It came up and took Chloe in a single closing of its jaws, pulled her straight under, and the water where she had been went white and then dark and then still. Her guide, by some mix of luck and skill and knowing precisely what to do, reached the reeds and the shallows and hauled himself out of the channel. There had been only a few seconds between the canoe going over and the water going quiet, and in those few seconds, there was nothing on earth that anyone could have done to change how it ended. Everyone pictures the lion or the crocodile. The hippo kills more people than either, mostly people who thought it looked harmless. The second canoe got its guests to the bank, and the alarm went back to camp, and a search went on into the next day, but a hippo attack in deep water leaves very little hope and often very little to find. Chloe was not among the living when it was done. Her guide, shaken past speaking, had done every single thing his training asked of him, and had still lost a guest who would not keep the distance he had kept begging her to keep. The authorities recorded it as one more hippo death on the water, one of the most ordinary ways the Delta takes a visitor. The news made its way home to Chloe's family in Britain. The camp, which had warned her and been waved off, had nothing in its rules to tighten, only a warning it had given, and that had been ignored. The next man went looking for trouble at the water's edge entirely on purpose, at a river where the warning was a sign at the top of the bank, which he decided did not apply to a man like him. The afternoon of March 15th, 2013 was hot and bright on the bank of the Luangwa River in eastern Zambia, a river well known for holding some of the largest crocodiles anywhere in Africa. A bush camp sat up above a bend in the river, and a wooden sign at the top of the bank spelled the one rule out in plain words for every guest who passed it, that the water's edge was off limits to everyone because the crocodiles here took things from the edge with no warning at all. Trevor Ellison, a Canadian visitor a few days into his stay, walked down toward that bank in the heat of the afternoon with his camera in his hand. Trevor was 41 and treated the danger as something meant for nervous people. He had read the sign and heard the talk at dinner about the crocodiles below and decided, the way a certain kind of confident man always does, that the warnings were for tourists foolish enough to do something stupid, and that he was not one of those. He wanted a close photo of the river running in the good afternoon light, taken from right down at the edge, at the exact spot the sign told him not to stand. He stepped over the low line of painted stones that marked the limit and walked down the last of the bank to the water, where the river ran slow and brown and gave absolutely nothing away. It looked empty and calm and harmless. That is exactly how it is supposed to look. He crouched right at the very edge to get the low angle he was after, the surface of the water a foot beneath his lens, close enough to reach out and touch. A big crocodile lies dead, still in the shallows at the foot of a bank, precisely because the foot of a bank is where living things come down to the water, and one had been lying there, its eyes and the ridge of its back barely creasing the surface the entire time Trevor was picking his way down the slope toward it. There was a sign, a rule, and the stories at dinner. He decided all of it had been written for other people. A big crocodile does not stalk and does not chase. It waits, sometimes for hours on end, at the exact line where the water meets the land, and it explodes into a strike only when something comes within reach of that edge. The strike and the roll into the deep water are one single motion and take only a second or two from start to finish. Over the first few feet at the waterline, a crocodile is faster than a person can even react, and from a low crouch at the very edge, there is no distance left to give up and nothing at all to hold on to. Trevor leaned out over the water for his shot. The crocodile came up out of the shallows directly in front of him, took him by the arm and the shoulder, and threw its whole weight backward into the deep water in the very same movement. There was one violent surge at the edge, a great spray of brown water and mud, and Trevor was dragged off the bank and under before he could get his feet under him or make much more than a single sound. Up at the camp, people heard something and turned to look, and by the time anyone had reached the top of the bank, the river below was flat and brown and empty again, as smooth as if he had never stood there at all. The crocodile had already taken him straight out into the deep channel and down, the way they always do, to hold him and to wait. A calm, brown river with a crocodile in it looks exactly like one without. That sign is the only warning you ever get. The camp staff and the local authorities searched the river that day and the next, working the banks downstream, but a crocodile takes what it catches to a place of its own, and there was very little to bring back. Trevor did not survive, and there had never been a single moment after he crouched at that edge when survival was still on the table. The authorities recorded the death and noted, as they always must, that the man had crossed a marked line and ignored a posted warning. His family was notified back in Canada. The sign stayed exactly where it had always stood, because the sign had never been the problem. The next one left the safety of the group on foot, for the oldest and simplest reason there is, to get a handful of steps closer to something she should have been happy to watch from where she was standing. The morning of November 2nd, 2019 was cool and clear on a private reserve in the north of South Africa, where a small group set out on foot behind an armed guide for a walking safari. A walking safari is the closest thing left to the old way of seeing Africa, out on your own 2 feet, with strict rules that exist because there is no vehicle to climb back into when something goes wrong. The guide had gone over those rules with them that morning, slowly and clearly. Stay together. Stay behind him. Do exactly what he says the very instant he says it. Hannah Reyes was near the back of the line when the guide brought them up, slowly and carefully and downwind on a black rhino. Hannah was 33, an American on her first walking safari, and she had listened to every word of the briefing and had meant her agreement to all of it. But a black rhino standing at 100 feet, half screened by scrub, does not make a good photograph, and the group had been stopped in a tight, silent line behind a low tangle of thorn bush where the angle on the animal was poor. Hannah wanted the shot clear and open. Rather than ask the guide, or simply wait for the rhino to move, she stepped quietly out of the line and moved off to the side on her own, out from behind the cover of the thorn bush, toward a place where she would have the whole animal in the open. The guide caught the movement and saw her go, and could not shout, because a raised voice at that range was every bit as likely to set the rhino off as anything she might do herself, and he was already turning to get the rest of the group down low and back. A black rhino sees very poorly, and lives by sound and by scent, and the great hidden danger in it is that it will commit fully to a charge at a noise or a smell, without ever once clearly seeing the thing that made it. Hannah, now out in the open on her own, put her weight down on a dry branch that cracked like a gunshot in the still morning air, and then, seeing the guide gesturing at her in a fury of silence, tried to hurry back to the group and only made more noise in her rush. To the rhino, she had just become the one loud, moving thing in the whole still world, out on its own, well away from the quiet, clustered mass of the others. The single file on a rhino walk is the whole thing keeping you alive. She stepped out of it for a clearer angle on a photo. A black rhino does not need to see a target clearly to destroy it. It turns toward a sound close by, and it drives at that sound at a speed that seems flatly impossible for an animal so heavy, well over 30 miles an hour, head lowered, front horn leading. It does not slow down to work out what it is about to hit. On open ground, in the few seconds it takes to close the gap, a person on foot has no hope of outrunning it and nothing anywhere to get in behind. The rhino spun toward the noise and came straight at Hannah, out in the open and well away from the rest of the group. It was over in a few seconds, and there was no outpacing any of it. The guide threw the others flat and got behind what cover there was and had his rifle coming up. But a walking guide's rifle is a desperate last resort against a charge already underway, and there was no clear shot to be had with Hannah directly between him and the animal. The rhino reached her at a full run, took her off her feet on the front horn, flung her down, and then wheeled straight back to hit her again where she had fallen, the way a rhino always does, never satisfied with the first contact. By the time the guide could have put in a shot, the animal was already turning away, blood up, crashing back toward the thick scrub. It left Hannah broken on the open ground, with injuries that nothing in the group's small medical kit could begin to meet, so very far from any real help. She stepped out of the line for a photo and gave away the one thing the whole walk was built to protect: the distance. The guide got a call out, and the group half carried Hannah toward the nearest place a vehicle could reach, but the reserve was remote and the injuries catastrophic, and too much time went by over rough ground before real help was possible. She did not survive it. The rhino, which had done nothing at all but answer a sudden closed noise, the only way its kind ever answers one, was left entirely alone. The reserve went back over the walk and could find no fault in how the guide had run it, only a guest who had broken the one rule it depended on. Hannah's people were told back in the United States. Afterward, the operator kept its walking groups tighter and made the briefing blunter, though it had already said everything that needed saying. The next man did the genuinely unthinkable with an animal most people on safari never even lay eyes on. A big cat, he decided, in the moment, that he could lean out and very nearly touch. The evening of July 12, 2016 was going gold and long across the Serengeti in Tanzania, when a vehicle came upon the one sighting every visitor hopes for and almost none of them ever get: a leopard, down out of its tree and lying in the open grass close beside the track in the last warm light of the day. Leopards are the ghosts of the safari, seen rarely and briefly and nearly always at a good distance. This one lay calm and still, astonishingly near the vehicle, watching it steadily with pale, unreadable eyes. Martin Duval, a French guest, could not believe his luck and could not, as it turned out, bring himself to leave well enough alone. Martin was 47 and had wanted to see a wild leopard his whole life, and here was one a stone's throw from the vehicle in perfect light. The guide told them quietly to stay still, stay silent, and above all, stay in the vehicle, because a leopard this close was a rare gift and a coiled, unpredictable animal that must not be crowded. For most of the sighting, Martin did as he was told. But the cat was so close and looked so utterly calm, and he wanted a shot nobody else back home would ever be able to match. And a calm-looking wild animal is the single thing people misread most badly of all. That stillness was nothing so simple as ease or tameness. The cat was holding its ground and watching, weighing the large shape sitting near it, deciding from one moment to the next whether to simply dissolve back into the grass. Martin took that stillness for permission. He leaned out of the open side of the vehicle, and then further still, phone held out ahead of him, trying to fill the frame with the cat, steadily closing the few feet of space between himself and it, until he was well outside the clean line of the vehicle and reaching right out over open ground toward a wild leopard. To the cat, the large and tolerable shape had just extended a small thing straight toward it, into its space, to a distance no leopard alive will allow. People read a still leopard as a calm one. It's really a loaded animal deciding what to do about you, and he leaned closer. A leopard is, pound for pound, one of the most dangerous cats on Earth, explosively fast at close range and built to kill prey heavier than itself with a single rush at the throat. It does not charge across open ground the way a lion or a rhino will. It ambushes from a few feet away, faster than the eye can follow it, the whole thing over in the time it takes a person to flinch. And a leopard that feels cornered or crowded at close quarters does not turn and slink away. It goes straight at whatever is crowding it, at the head and the neck, with everything it has. The cat went from lying still in the grass to full contact in a single blur that not one person in the vehicle even saw resolve into movement. One instant, Martin was leaning out with his phone held ahead of him, and the next, the leopard was on him, up and into the open side of the vehicle, a compact storm of muscle and claws locked onto his head and his shoulders. It drove him back down into the vehicle and in among the other guests, who threw themselves aside and shouted and beat at it, and it was that sudden chaos and noise, far more than anything they actually managed to land, that finally made the cat let go. It released him, twisted back out of the vehicle in a single blink, and was gone into the long grass as though it had never existed, leaving the sighting empty and the inside of the vehicle a scene of pure horror. The whole attack, from the leopard first moving to the leopard vanishing, had lasted only a few seconds, but a few seconds of a leopard fastened to a person's head is far more than enough. He got a photo of a leopard closer than almost anyone ever will. It was the last thing he ever did. The guide got the vehicle turned and racing for help while the guests did what little they could, but the wounds a leopard inflicts to the head and neck in seconds are rarely survivable, and Martin did not survive the drive. The leopard was not pursued or destroyed because it had been crowded down to a distance no wild leopard will tolerate and had done precisely what a cornered leopard does. The park recorded the death and the plain, simple cause of it, a guest who had leaned out of a vehicle toward a wild cat at arm's length. Martin's family learned of it in France. The other guests carried home a memory none of them had wanted, of the rarest sighting of the trip turning in a heartbeat into the worst thing they had ever seen. The last one badly underestimated the least glamorous animal on the whole safari, an old bull that looks like nothing more than a farmyard ox and happens to be the single most likely one of all of them to kill you. The morning of October 8th, 2022 was warm and green in Queen Elizabeth National Park in Uganda, where the open country holds great herds of buffalo, and off on their own, the old bulls that have been driven out of them. A vehicle had stopped where one of those old bulls stood alone near the track, caked in dried gray mud, chewing slowly, looking for all the world like a large and harmless ox out of somebody's field. Greg Thornton, an American guest, looked at it and saw nothing more than an easy photo opportunity, which is the exact mistake that this one plain-looking animal has killed more careless people with than very nearly anything else in Africa. Greg was 50, and of everything on the safari, the buffalo was the animal he took least seriously. It had no fangs and no claws, it did not roar, it looked like livestock, and it stood there doing nothing. The guide, who took that buffalo more seriously than anything else in the entire park, told him plainly that a lone old bull, a dagaboy, is the single most dangerous animal they were at all likely to see, unpredictable and vengeful and shockingly quick to charge, and that under no circumstances was anyone to leave the vehicle. Greg privately thought the guide was being awfully dramatic about what amounted to a cow. He wanted a picture of himself beside the vehicle with the buffalo in the background, the sort of picture that would look good shown around at home. He waited until the guide had turned away, opened the door on the far side of the vehicle from the bull, and stepped quietly down onto the track, meaning to be out for only a moment. A lone bull buffalo is already in a foul and simmering temper simply by nature, old and sore and cast out of the herd, and it watches everything that moves near it with a flat, hostile, unblinking attention. The very moment Greg stepped down and became a separate upright shape standing on the ground, the bull's head came up and swung around, and it locked onto him with that particular heavy stillness that, in a buffalo, is the last thing that ever comes before a charge. Everything on that safari scared him except the one animal that kills the most people. It looked like a cow, so he got out. A Cape buffalo is a ton of muscle and bone under a heavy helmet of horn, and it can run at 35 miles an hour and turn almost in its own length. The charge is only half of it. What makes a buffalo so deadly is everything that comes after, because it does not stop at simply knocking a person down. It hooks with those horns, drives the victim into the ground, kneels its full weight onto them, and it will circle back around again and again to be sure of the job, hunting a wounded man with a cold determination that none of the big predators ever show. Hunters who have faced everything Africa has feared the buffalo most of all, for exactly that reason. The bull dropped its head and charged, and it covered the ground between them before Greg had even turned all the way back toward the door. It hit him with the front of its horns and the solid boss of bone between them and drove him off his feet and hard into the side of the vehicle, and then it set about him the way only a buffalo does. It hooked him and threw him, drove him along the ground, and when he was down, it knelt its full ton of weight onto him. The guide was leaning on the horn and gunning the engine to try to frighten it off, and still the bull would not leave, coming back around to the crumpled shape once more to hook at it again, the vengeful, thorough finishing that has made the animal's name right across the continent. Only after it had done far more than enough did it back off at last, blowing hard and tossing its head, and stand its ground close by, as if daring anyone in the vehicle to climb down and come to him. The lion, the leopard, and the elephant all left him alone. The animal that looked like livestock killed him because he wouldn't believe that it was dangerous. The bull would not leave the body, and recovering Greg once the animal finally moved off was a long and dangerous business, done from the vehicle. There had been nothing anyone could do from the instant he stepped down. He did not survive, and no one could have, given what a buffalo does once it has a person on the ground. The rangers recorded the death with the weary familiarity of people who have watched the buffalo do this before, always to somebody sure it looked harmless. Greg's family was notified back home. The guide had told him plainly that the dull, ordinary-looking bull was the most dangerous thing in the park, and Greg had heard it and gone ahead all the same. 7 people, 7 warnings, 7 animals just being what they are. Every time the warning came first, and every time it wasn't enough.